holistic and integrated approaches, offer several positive examples, and then challenge us with needed approaches that can strengthen the global stocktake and signal wider international cooperation. And in this presentation and our wider discussion, I encourage us to engage both from here and from here. In my experience, holistic and integrated refers to approaches which address the root causes driving climate change while also helping heal related planetary crises, including existential rates of species extinction, of chemical pollution, soil erosion, ocean acidification, and approaches which prioritize people and protection of nature over profit and power interests. In the last year alone, we celebrated the following international cooperation on holistic and integrated approaches. 3 examples: the UN General Assembly recognition of a human right to a clean, sustainable and healthy environment, a vision of hope. The Beyond Oil and Gas Agreement, BOGA, a brave commitment. And the ever-growing research that a human rights-based approach results in more coherent, legitimate, and sustainable policy. In sum, most successful policy. And a human rights-based approach known as rights-based approaches in the IPCC 6th Assessment Report enable or embed human rights, including the rights of Indigenous peoples. They embed meaningful public participation in decision-making, access to information and education, gender equality, just transition, benefit to the vulnerable, protection of biodiversity, intergenerational equity and children's rights, and cooperation is a human rights obligation. I will now offer some reflections on holistic and integrated approaches that can dramatically scale up action, but need greater international cooperation that the global stocktake engagement can signal. 1. To repeat, rights-based approaches can ground holistic and integrated action in the global stocktake, while guiding us toward policies which are experienced as fair and therefore more likely to be supported and not rejected. Because without the people's support, we are lost, and without a vision that is healthy and fair, the people are lost. 2, the global stocktake can emphasize the importance of truthful engagement with people about what is happening, why it is happening, and how they can help. Truthful engagement, for example, in high-consumption, high-emitting countries, because households with the incomes in the top 10% contribute up to 45% of emissions. We're racing for more when enough would best protect our children. And truthful engagement, for example, in diet, 1/5 of emissions are linked to human diets, yet scientific language on meat and dairy, the unsustainable industrial production and consumption of which drives land degradation and species extinction. This language is usually suppressed in intergovernmental negotiations. 3, the global stocktake can highlight how sustainable and just economic systems and sustainable agriculture transitions are essential. Both the AR5 and the AR6 identify economic growth as the top driver of carbon dioxide. And the Paris Agreement calls for sustainable lifestyle, sustainable patterns of consumption and production for particularly developed country parties taking the lead. And the global stocktake can integrate the IPCC definition of sustainable land management, which was left as a footnote, I remember. It can also break down the silos, and for example, including environmental cost when we talk about cost, and signaling international cooperation to support accountability mechanisms. For example, in this room we have people working on the rights of nature, ecocide, ecological rights for children, a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, an international court of justice advisory opinion on human rights obligations in the context of climate action, or driving the word limited and dropping it from limited liability. The global stocktake can stress the effectiveness of community-based bottom-up climate action, including examples of positive regulation to promote, in particular, decentralized renewable energy ownership, which has massive holistic and integrated benefits, including peace building. I'm going to give you a positive example of getting solar panels to the poorest. In Germany, where cash-poor people can own solar panels through the right to a state development bank loan, the right to sell energy at a subsidized rate that directly repays the loan, leading to individual ownership and helpful income. A less helpful example, in England, not Scotland or Wales, but in England, community-led sustainable energy groups struggle to get permission to build a community-owned onshore wind turbine. The will is there, but not always the way. And worldwide, most solar panel ownership remains accessible only to the upper middle class. For the global stocktake, we could focus on emissions at source, and I repeat this, the global stocktake needs to focus on emissions at source, or we miss this brief window to influence our children's chances and the right to live on a livable and sustainable planet. Our human family now recognizes dangerous climate change is happening, but many of the root causes offer very financially lucrative profits, and we stall. In a safer IPCC, temperature pathways reflect a rapid reduction of fossil fuels, yet disturbingly we are seeing fossil fuels, the major driver of climate change, being reframed as okay. Rely on carbon offsets despite IPCC warnings on land shifting from sink to source, on geoengineering such as carbon dioxide removal, which threatens biodiversity and food security, and which the IPCC findings relate to only hard-to-abate emissions, not general emissions reduction. Or geoengineering technologies like carbon capture storage, which is not yet available to scale, energy-intensive, expensive, emissions inefficient, and passes that limited challenge of limited storage, leakage, and delayed action to our children. To finish off, the global stocktake can emphasize how human security is a livable and sustainable planet. We humans spend over $2 trillion every year on military expenditure explained as security. The global stocktake can signal urgent need for proper rules in reporting military and conflict-related emissions, both within the Paris Agreement and the National Inventory Guidelines. And the global stocktake can highlight how climate finance can be raised through shifting military funding away from weapons that kill people and toward climate action and loss and damage. The global stocktake can signal the critical need for grants rather than loans in a world facing a sovereign debt crisis, to signal how debt relief could benefit holistic and integrated policies in countries crippled by debt payments intensified by COVID-19, and to raise climate finance through polluter-pay taxation, such as taxing fossil fuels at extraction, international aviation, financial taxations, and creating revenue for action to vulnerable communities and loss and damage. The global stocktake can signal a critical role of international cooperation to regulate banks, investment in fossil fuel infrastructure, and shift billions out of fossil fuel subsidies. The global stocktake can embrace language of responsibility. We are liberated when we stop denying and stop avoiding historical responsibility. Extraction wealthy countries can do so much more. And finally, signal the need for international cooperation to stop the arrest and killing of environmental defenders. They are our prophets. Silence them and we silence